Welcome to the Restitutor Orbis channel. Thank you for joining me today as we continue our explorations to restore the world. Today we are looking at the Skellig Islands, an old world sanctuary in time. 10,000-year legend from Ireland. Like mighty ships that sail the Atlantic foam, the Skellig Isles parade the Kerry coast. It's a strange place with the needle's eye, where shipwrecks lie, where the king of the world rested for a while, and a place for the pilgrim, a sanctuary of time. 14 steps to nowhere, out of solid stone, don't lead us to the heavens, or lead us to the sea. First from Skellig, by Clonid. So I wanted to start the video by sharing the Clonid song called Skellig, because I believe that there are clues within that song that overview the Skellig Islands, especially Great Skellig, which we'll be looking at closely, but we need to talk about both of them to have an understanding about how remarkable they are. Not to mention, as you see in the picture, there are several pictures where we see Little Skellig from Greater Skellig. But that song really alludes to the mystery of the Skellig Islands, and even the mainstream agrees that there is somewhat of a mystery about them. And in the interest of examining all perspectives, this channel will look at what the mainstream tells us about the Skellig Islands. The Skellig Islands, once known as the Skellocks, are two small, steep, and rocky islands lying about 13 kilometers, 8 miles west of Bolus Head on the Iveragh Peninsula in County Kerry, Ireland. And for all of my Irish, UK, Scottish viewers, I apologize for issues with the pronunciations. I'm not up on my Gaelic to English, so by all means in the comments if you want to correct pronunciations, please do. It's been a long time since I've been there. The larger of the two is Skellig Michael, also known as Great Skellig, which together with Little Skellig is at the center of a 364 hectare or 899 acre important bird area established by Birdwatch Ireland in 2000. Skellig Michael is also famous for an early Christian monastery that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and therefore it gains extra attention and interest from us. Little Skellig, the smaller of the two islands, is Little Skellig. It is Ireland's largest northern gannet colony with almost 30,000 pairs and is closed to the public. It is also one of the world's largest northern gannet colonies and is of international importance. The island is 134 meters or 440 feet tall and is approximately 1.5 kilometers 1 mile east-northeast of Skellig Michael. Well, based on that, let's take a look at Skellig Michael. Skellig Michael, also called Great Skellig, is a twin-pinnacled crag 11.6 kilometers 7.2 miles west of the Iveragh Peninsula in County Kerry, Ireland. The island is named after the Archangel Michael, with Skellig derived from the Irish language word scileadh, meaning a splinter of stone. Its twin island, Little Skellig, is smaller and inaccessible. Landing is not permitted. The two islands rose 374 to 360 million years ago during a period of mountain formation. Yes, how is it we have such certainty for what happened hundreds of millions of years ago? For some reason we do. Okay, look, I'm going with the mainstream account here and I'm going to relate it, so excuse me. Later they were separated from the mainland by rising water levels. Skellig Michael consists of approximately 22 hectares, 54 acres of rock, with its highest point known as the Spit, 714 feet above sea level, or 218 meters. The island is defined by its twin peaks and intervening valley, known as Christ's Saddle, which make its landscape steep and inhospitable. It is best known for its Gaelic monastery, founded between the 6th and 8th centuries, and its variety of inhabiting species, which include gannets, puffins, a colony of razorbills, and a population of approximately 50 gray seals. Amazing biodiversity on Mountain Island. The island is of special interest to archaeologists as the monastic settlement is in unusually good condition. Wonder why that is. The rock contains the remains of a tower house, a megalithic stone row, as if you can't see why this island would have so much interest for us in our explorations, and a cross-inscribed slab known as the Wailing Woman. The monastery is situated at an elevation of 170 to 180 meters, 550 to 600 feet. Christ's Saddle at 129 meters, 422 feet, and the Flagstaff area at 37 meters, 120 feet above sea level. The monastery can be approached by narrow and steep flights of stone steps which ascend from 3 landing points. The Hermitage on the south peak contains a dangerous approach and is largely closed to the public. Because of the often difficult crossing from the mainland and the exposed nature of the landing spots, the island is accessible only during summer months. UNESCO designated Skellig Michael a World Heritage Site in 1996. So that's a background. Looking at the mainstream account, you can see that there are many interesting mysteries and anomalies about Skellig Michael, and really about both the islands, that draw our attention and warrant a deep exploration. Alright, so where are we? What are we looking at? We're focused on Ireland, west of United Kingdom, which is England and Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And we're right on the northeast side of the Atlantic. Now, zooming in, where are the Skellig Islands specifically? And you see they're right here, these two very small islands. And just keep in mind Ventry Beach. We'll be talking about that a little bit later, all off of County Kerry or the Kerry coast. Now, what exactly do these islands look like? Well, let's go to our layer. Ah, yes, there's our classic Google layer. Does not look so realistic, but as usual, as you zoom in, you get some better aerial imagery. And here on the right, we have Little Skellig, which, of course, we saw in the account that you can't land on. So who knows what mysteries are there or what's been there. You can't land on it, so difficult to really study it. But Greater Skellig, which has our focus, we'll look at, and I was there in the late 2000s, so I can verify that a lot of what's being reflected here on the Google map is accurate to the most extent that it can be, but we're going to look at several different perspectives of it. So what's the layout of the island? Well, we have the lower lighthouse here. We have the monastery, which gains a lot of our interest here because the monastery gives us an indication that there were artificial buildings on this island, although there might be a lot more to this island than we could possibly realize. And then, of course, we have what's called the Needle's Eye, which is the Twin Peaks of Skellig. And that is the overview of the island. We're going to be taking a look at some imagery from the island itself and analyzing it. And then we're going to come back and take a look at some different perspectives from Google Earth to see what it can show us from different parts of the island. Another part of the overview is you can actually see some of the wall that goes all the way around it. You can even see some of the stairways if you look very carefully, and then some of the walls of the monastery. All very interesting, all very intriguing. It's clear that what's here is very, very old, and even the mainstream account says somewhere between the 6th to the 8th century, or 500 to 700 in the quote-unquote common era, as we call it. That's a long time. You're talking about something that's 1,500 years old to 1,700 years old, could be much older. Again, we talk about time and measuring time, and we're going through different eras, different civilizations, and different languages. So we don't know for sure, but it's very clear that what is here on Skellig Michael or Greater Skellig, Great Skellig, is remarkable, and it's something that we need to look at in detail. So let's begin the exploration of Greater Skellig by looking at some photos and seeing what we have. In this initial photo, we have an overview of the monastery. And you can see one of the peaks right there on the left. The monastery is very remarkable. We have some domed buildings that were supposedly built by monks hundreds or over 1,000 years ago, depending on what timeline you want to go with. You have the carved stairs. We'll zoom in and take a closer look. But just amazing detail on this wall made of all these small stones, and yet so much symmetry to these walls once they were put together. And then, of course, you even see this step concept to some of these stone huts or domes or whatever you want to call them. You won't see a monastery that's built like this really anywhere else. You'll see stone structures, and they may try to attribute it to other monasteries or other original builders, but just the detail that goes into this overall monastery, I think, is remarkable. And you look over here, and you almost see what appears to be sort of a pyramid structure. I don't know if I'd say it's a full pyramid, but it definitely has those sloping angles on it. And the other intriguing aspect is when you look at the overall rock, and you have to remember that they built this on a mountain of rock, supposedly. This remarkable, beautiful monastery. And just seeing what remains of it, there is just something breathtaking and something that defies imagination about it. It's almost as though you're on another world. Which is ironic that I say that because the filming location of the Star Wars movies, both The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, the scenes featuring Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, were filmed here. And I have to give credit to filmmaker Rian Johnson in the fact that he managed to make this beautiful, inspiring place seem very dull and drab and depressing. That's a real feat of filmmaking there. But back on the topic, you also see some very amazing edges on this. Now, is this natural? Is this something that was carved out by the monks? Well, it's hard to say. And just thinking about the whole concept of these monks living on this island all by themselves, how did they sustain themselves? Well, they ate puffins, maybe they ate seals, and then maybe they ate moss and lichen off the rocks. They'd probably try to tell us that. I'm joking about that last part. And then, of course, what about water? Well, they just collected rainwater. Okay. It's always interesting when you think about the logistics of what it would have been to maintain this settlement. And the other interesting aspect, and probably the most interesting aspect, is just the stairs, the detail, and the effort it would have taken to get all these stairs carved out and made. Quite remarkable and quite fascinating. And it's interesting when you think about the fact that the walls themselves and the domes or the huts just seem like they were once more of a solid structure that's just eroded over time. It gives you that impression. And that's my impression. That's what I'm sharing from actually being on the ground. Moving on, this is from the monastery, and it's a view of Little Skellig from Skellig Michael or Great Skellig. And here you have this amazing arch, and you can see some of the stonework a little more closely. Now, this is where you really get on that dividing line between what's artificial and what's natural. And if you look at these stones, you could be forgiven for thinking a lot of these are natural. They appear natural. Well, this is the erosion of time. This is exposure to the elements. So it goes back to that question as to how old the island really is. How old is this structure? And you look at how these stones have eroded over time, and yet when you look at them from a distance, the symmetry and the angles is remarkable. Every aspect of it, you can see there was fine detail. Now we can explain this by saying, well, this monastic order, they were there for a long time, and this is what they focused on. This is how they showed their piety, by dedicating all their efforts to building this amazing structure. And then they had this amazing keyhole view that they decided to put in with this beautiful arch that they somehow carved with whatever implements they had available at the time, or formed or shaped it, so they could have a perfect view of Little Skellig out the doorway in the morning. It's a remarkable, breathtaking view, and whether it's a sunny day, it's a cloudy day, or it's raining, you are always inspired whenever you're on Great Skellig. Now, this is a close-up of some of the larger rock formations, supposedly, of the mountain. And yet again, you see these amazing straight angles. And this reminds me of what I've seen in Castle Rock, any one of the Castle Rock locations across the United States, although I'm referring to the Castle Rock that I saw in Wisconsin. But you have these horizontal lines that are very straight. You can see it in the rocks and some of the vertical lines. And then down here, are these some of the rocks that the monks built with this? Well, this is where the line gets really, really blurred. It's hard to tell what's natural, what's artificial. Is it possible that it could all be artificial? Well, some people want to say, well, no, there's another explanation for that. It really is just a mountain, so stop trying to look for these amazing megastructures. And yet, in the official account, they do tell us that there is a megastructure. And this is one of the aspects that they consider a megastructure. So even the mainstream indicates that somehow they moved and placed these amazingly large blocks. How they did it, we don't know. Magic? Did they use the Force? Not sure, but it's there, and it's really set up like this, and it truly defies easy explanation. And this is a backup of that view that we looked at through that arch, and you see these stones, and you almost get the impression that some of these stones were vitrified or melted together in some fashion. Was that part of the original construction, or were they subjected to some other force that we can't even begin to imagine? Hard to say, but when you look closely at it, There are many castles and old structures across Scotland and Ireland that have this appearance that they've somehow been vitrified or melted together. And when you pull back, you can see the overall structure of the top of the hut. And then, of course, looking at Little Skellig, and this is a great view of Little Skellig from a distance, you can see some of these sharp angles. And you really have to wonder what's there and what could be explored on that island. Fortunately, no one can land there, but we can still look at it and employ our imaginations. And another view, pulling back more of the stone huts or the domes in the monastery. And again, just the effort this would have taken. And we have to wonder what this originally looked like right after it was built. How did they do it? How did they design it? How did they lay it out? They didn't have their version of E. Townsend Mix at that time to design the monastery. And the inclinations that this was even a Christian monastery, I remember being there, are very thin at best. There's maybe one or two crosses that you see there, at least that I remember. If I'm remembering incorrectly, someone please correct me. But it was just remarkable that it didn't seem to be very marked as a Christian site. There weren't really that many crosses that I remember seeing. I was just utterly fascinated at the time and amazed by the type of structures and how they even managed to pull this off on this island that's a mountain in the middle of the ocean. And then another view of the stone huts, and when you close in on it, you can see the domed cemetery that they had when they built these. And then again, looking at Little Skellig. And then, of course, some of the step nature that you have, the steps on these domes. So it's not enough that they're domes, they built steps on them too, and laid all this out perfectly on this isolated island in a time when we're told people didn't live very long. They faced starvation, they faced diseases, and other terrors without the available of modern medicine, modern logistics, and just decided to isolate themselves out here and build these amazing structures, all in a bout of piety. It's amazing what piety can do. That's, I guess, why they call it piety. Here's an overall view of Greater Skellig, and here's where you can see the needle's eye between the two peaks. And just looking at its overall structure, it's a very, very remarkable island. But I do wonder, is it an island or was it something else at one point in time? Now, of course, we have many different theories that conflict with the mainstream. Was this actually an island? There are some theories that would indicate perhaps this was some kind of large organism. That's certainly not off the table, but when you're actually there and you look and you see all the symmetry and the right angles in the larger rock itself, and the admission from the mainstream that there are megalithic structures there, you really have to question what it is. And there's a much older legend, a myth, that's associated with Great Skellig that needs to be considered, and that's the 10,000-year-old legend that we promised at the start of the video. But nevertheless, you just look at the detail, the stairway, how this was done, the effort this would have taken. It defies simple explanation, and it inspires the imagination. And then here's another view of the stairway going to the top between the needle's eye, and it's quite a hike up there. And you have to wonder about building that stairway, but then of course you see the other major rocks here and how it builds up to the top of the peak. And the views that you have just about everywhere on this island are breathtaking. They're amazing. And then this is one of my favorites, because here you can see the stairway that we know is made artificially, but then you're surrounded by these very large blocks. And I think this is why they had to admit the fact that there are megalithic structures here, because even this goes too far as to try to confuse or give an alternate explanation for, well, this being natural. Yes, these very straight rocks were formed by hundreds, thousands of years of erosion. And never mind these stairs. You don't wonder if the fact is that the island was viewed by too many people went out there and they saw it, and word got around, and they had to come up with a different story, or they had to confuse the story a little bit. Really, Skellig Michael is amazing in and of itself for the explanations, that it's something that it doesn't feel that they try to hide as much as other locations, because I don't think they have any option. But very difficult to say. When you look at it and you see all the straight lines and you see what are clearly blocks next to stairs, you know that there was something remarkable here at one point in time. And that's why we say it's a sanctuary in time. And looking again at the stairway and looking at the tall peaks, and it's the same story, just beauty everywhere you look and just amazing. And then, of course, you have part of the rock wall in the path, and if you're not careful, you can definitely take a very dangerous fall anywhere on this island, which is something else that's remarkable about it. Now, we have all these stories, and there's other locations, like I can think of Mount Huashan in China, where they have a monastery that's located high up in the mountains, and one wrong step, and all of a sudden you're down one monk. And I don't mean to make light of that, but just describing the situation as it really is, you're walking on the edge of a literal cliff that if you fall off, that's it. So, yes, I can definitely see why they would say that it requires a lot of piety and just a lot of focus to even be on one of these sites, whether it's Skellig Michael or Mount Huashan or any other isolated monastic retreat that's in the mountains or some other pernicious location. This is not Skellig Michael. This is Giant's Causeway. And I know some of my viewers are going to ask me, well, since we know that you've been to Devil's Tower, does the top of Devil's Tower look like Giant's Causeway? I'm not going to answer that in this video yet. I think that warrants its own video. Then you ask the question, well, why is he showing Giant's Causeway? What's that have to do with Skellig Michael? Well, Giant's Causeway was built by this individual, allegedly, a mythological Irish hero named Fionn McCool, an individual who, if you combine the exploits of Perseus, Hercules, and many other Greek heroes, you might match the exploits of Fionn McCool. And Fionn McCool, the mythological Irish hero, is the individual who's the centerpiece of the 10,000-year legend that Skellig Michael is connected to with the King of the World. No, Fionn McCool is not the King of the World, but Fionn McCool is the warrior who stood against the King of the World, and we'll explore that legend as the final part of the video. Who is Fionn McCool? Well, this is an Irish mythological hero, and there is no way I'm going to be able to do justice to this myth without taking hours to talk about it. So this is just a brief overview and to discuss how this plays into our exploration of Greater Skellig. Great Skellig. Fionn McCool. Fionn McCool, often anglicized Finn McCool or Maccool, is a hero in Irish mythology as well as in later Scottish and Manx folklore. He is the leader of the Fianna bands of young roving hunter warriors, as well as being a seer and a poet. He is said to have a magic thumb that bestows him with great wisdom. He is often depicted hunting with his hounds Bran and Shealong and fighting with his spear and sword. The tales of Fionn and his Fionn form the Fianna cycle or Finian cycle, much of it narrated by Fionn's son, the poet Oisin. The Fianna were a band of warriors, also known as a military order composed mainly of the members of two rival clans, Clan Baskna, to which Finn and Cumhal belonged, and Clan Morna. The Finians were supposed to be devoted to the service of the High King and to the repelling of foreign invaders. After the fall of Cumhal, Gul Mac Morna replaced him as the leader of the Fianna, holding the position for 10 years. So we have this mythological hero, and I'm well aware there's a lot of debates as to what the actual pronunciations of the first name is. Is it Fionn? Is it Finn? There's a lot of debate. I'm not trying to get in the middle of that. I'm just trying to relate what the summary of this amazing mythological hero really was. But you have someone who is capable of remarkable feats and led a band of warriors who, when you look deeper into the mythology, they actually say it's a military order, or similar to what would later be known as knights. And actually, the legend of Fionn McCool reads a lot like King Arthur in some ways, especially with the ending of him still being sleeping and ready to defend Ireland at the time of Ireland's greatest need. Now, let's go to the Battle of Ventry. Ventry Beach, and we'll look at how this relates to the location of Skellig Michael, or Great Skellig. But Ventry Beach, an amazing beach with a great overlooking ridgeline. And what's this story? Ventry Beach was the scene of a 17-day battle in Irish folklore between the legendary Fianna, the military order, led by the brave Fionn McCool, and Dare Dawn, the powerful king of the world. Dare Dawn invaded Ireland at Ventry to exact retribution on Fionn for having eloped with his wife, the daughter of King Bolcan, the King of France. A similar situation brought English invaders centuries later when Dermot MacMurrough abducted the wife of Tiernan O'Rourke. Dare Dawn mustered a huge army of men from continental Europe and further afield. This force, which far outnumbered the Fianna, landed at Ventry, where the battle commenced. Now, a few more details that aren't here. What it doesn't say is that Dare Dawn was the king of the entire world. Not just France, not just Europe. It's very clearly stated in the mythology, king of the world. The other thing that's not mentioned is this huge army that Dare Dawn's main armies consisted of subsections, or different parts of the army, called the dog-headed people and the cat-headed people. Now, we imagine that, people with cat heads and dog heads. When you actually read what the original poem is alluding to, it almost gives you the impression that these weren't even human beings. Perhaps these were corrupted human beings. And they're not referred to even as people. They're referred to as things. And it's amazing with the mythology that these armies of things actually helped Dare Dawn conquer the entire world, except for Ireland. And Ireland was the only land within the Greater Lands that were not under his sovereignty. And that was the other casus belli of this invasion. The battle raged for 17 days, and other Irish armies arrived in Ventry to assist their countrymen. The invaders were getting the better of the Fianna until the son of the King of Ulster arrived with an army of boys. This timely intervention prevented the defeat of the Fianna, although the Ulstermen were all eventually killed during the exchanges. So, very bloody battle. Great image there of Fionn McCool. Next to arrive were the Tuatha Dé Danann, a people with supernatural powers who had themselves invaded or arrived in Ireland, in County Leitrim. Their arrival allowed the Fianna to rest and recuperate for a day, whilst the Dé Danann took up the fight. The following day, the Fianna regained momentum on the battlefield and turned the tide in their favor. The Tuatha Dé Danann, they bear study in and of themselves, and are a remarkable people, supposedly with supernatural powers, and their story is quite interesting too, in the fact that they went north in some land way beyond anything that the world knew at that time, and somehow they had acquired supernatural powers. Although it's interesting when you look into details about them, they bear study in and of themselves. Fionn's son Oisin, later to depart to Tir na Nog, the land of the forever young, faced off with King Bolcan during the exchanges and vanquished the French king. On the 17th day, Fionn slayed the Greek Amazon warrior Ogimak, and then slayed Dare Dawn. With this, the invaders lost heart, admitted defeat, and took flight. Cale, a young Fianna warrior who had distinguished himself every day in battle, was drowned whilst pursuing his enemies into the sea. His wife, Cred, a Tuatha Dé Danann woman who was at Ventry to tend the wounded soldiers, was heartbroken to see her dead husband being carried shoulder high back to camp. Cred lay down beside Cale in his grave and died from a broken heart. The two were then buried together. Instead of celebrating their greatest military victory, the Fianna were left heavy-hearted for the losses they had suffered. Many local place names take their name from the battle, including Glen Bolcan and a boggy area known as Gwen de Trenhair, I'm sure I'm slaughtering that pronunciation, or the Slaughter of the Mighty Men. Many burial cairns have been recorded in and around Ventry, which some depict as evidence of a great loss of life having occurred in the area, and some basis, in fact, for the battle. So this is a remarkable account. A single nation that resisted the King of the World and the combined armies of the King of the World. It's also interesting to note that Fionn McCool appealed to what they called the High King of Ireland at the time for help, and the High King of Ireland was not fond of Fionn McCool and denied him help. So, remarkable account of the battle. Let's take a look at what the geography of this battle would have been and how it relates back to Great Skellig. What conclusions can we draw about the Skellig Islands? Well, there's amazing structures on Greater Skellig, Skellig Michael, We do have the monastery, we do have megalithic structures, walls, stairways, and an amazing appearance. What was this? Was this just some old bastion of the old world? Was this really a monastery as we're told? We have clues for all these potential conclusions. We have to wonder, though, if we go with the five eras theory, how does the monastery fit into that? And it is quite possible that the monastery is some sort of remnant from the Golden Age. And in fact, the entire Great Skellig itself could be some sort of remnant from the Golden Age. Technology that's beyond our imagination. Or it could simply be as they tell us, and it's merely a mountain, or the top of a mountain that protrudes from the ocean and just happens to make a less than hospitable island, which myth tells us that Daredon, the king of the world, used as a staging area or a tactical assembly area for his vast armada, prior to his invasion fleet moving north and landing here at Ventry Beach, which is where the Battle of Ventry occurred. Many interesting theories, and this is why the Skellig Islands are a remarkable place, why they are a mystery from whatever perspective that we have, and there are many questions that we need to continue to ask and explore, because understanding what happened here is the key to understanding our true history and understanding who we are, and that's how we'll restore the world. Well, thank you for joining me today. Please ask questions, continue to explore yourself, and you'll restore the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to the Restitutor Orbis channel, and thank you for joining me today. We'll be conducting an exploration into the Voynich manuscript. Is this lost old world knowledge? This video will have a couple different approaches. We're going to introduce the Voynich manuscript to those who may not be familiar with it. And for those who are familiar with it, we're going to cover what the mainstream tells us about it. This is a very enigmatic document, and we're not exactly sure what it could mean, or if it has direct connections to the old world. Although, if there's something that would be a candidate for direct connections to the old world, I believe that the Voynich manuscript would definitely be high on the list. So, without any further delay, let's dive into it and see what we can learn about the Voynich manuscript, and if it does have any connections to the old world. What does the mainstream tell us about the Voynich manuscript? The Voynich manuscript is an illustrated codex handwritten in an unknown script referred to as Voynichese. You can't make this stuff up. The vellum on which it is written has been carbon dated to the early 15th century, 1404 to 1438. So a good range of 34 years. You know, it's funny, we used to hear the term carbon dated used quite a bit, especially when we were referring to events that occurred at some obscure period in history, and yet we don't see it used as much, but here they have it. Stylistic analysis indicates it may have been composed in Italy during the Italian Renaissance. The origins, authorship, and purpose of the manuscript are debated. Hypotheses suggest that it is a script for a natural language or constructed language, an unread code, cipher, or other form of cryptography, or a meaningless hoax. Wow, we're seeing some very objective considerations from the mainstream. What exactly is going on here? Let's continue. The manuscript consists of around 240 pages, but there is evidence that pages are missing. Some pages are foldable sheets of varying sizes. Most of the pages have fantastical illustrations or diagrams, some crudely colored, with sections of the manuscript showing people, fictitious plants, astrological symbols, etc. The text is written from left to right. Interesting. The manuscript is named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-Lithuanian book dealer who purchased it in 1912. Since 1969, it has been held in Yale's University Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. The Voynich manuscript has been studied by professional and amateur cryptographers, including American and British codebreakers from both World War I and World War II. Codebreakers Prescott Currier, William Friedman, Elizabeth Friedman, and John Tiltman were unsuccessful. The manuscript has never been demonstrably deciphered, and none of the proposed hypotheses have been independently verified. The mystery of its meaning and origin has excited the popular imagination, provoking study and speculation. In 2020, Yale University published the manuscript online in its entirety, 225 pages in their digital collections library. And I did reference that, and I will provide that link with the description of the video. Let's continue and look into some more details of the Voynich manuscript. One thing I find fascinating is that they call it a manuscript and not a codex, even though it's very clearly a codex. And we might remember the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. One book I was going to look into, but all that was really unique about it was the fact that it was composed in a very short amount of time. It has a very similar form of writing, indicating that one person wrote it, although who knows what technology was available when it was written. And it has a very Monty Python-esque picture of the devil. So let us continue with investigating the Voynich manuscript. What do they say about the transcription? Various transcription alphabets have been created to equate Voynich characters with Latin characters to help with cryptoanalysis, such as the extensible, originally European, Voynich alphabet, EVA. The first major one was created by the First Study Group, led by cryptographer William F. Friedman in the 1940s, where each line of the manuscript was transcribed to an IBM punch card to make it machine readable. So, a cryptographer, during World War II apparently, was assigned the task of deciphering the Voynich manuscript. Even though one would think that actual code breaking would have higher precedent in World War II. Very fascinating. You have to wonder if the powers that be at that time felt that there was perhaps something within the so-called codex of this manuscript that would have given them a decisive advantage. Although, as we understand the official narrative of World War II, the Allies had a decisive advantage and worked it pretty quickly. Nonetheless, I find it interesting that they assign these characters to Latin characters, and you have to wonder if this is just something that they're throwing at us to show that they tried to make some sort of progress, and maybe this is a completely different language and it's a completely different alphabet, or it's a completely different way of communicating that is beyond our understanding. Nevertheless, they have to show that it has some sort of understanding in relation to our language. Otherwise, how exactly do you explain this? And one of the reasons I think there could be a strong possibility that this is a connection to the old world is imagine that this is a language that has not been spoken or even known of for centuries, or perhaps even longer. Or maybe not that long at all if we go off the reset theory. I am going to postulate, though, the theory that the Voynich manuscript is something that's actually derived from the old world, and may have survived during the previous civilization, kept in a historical record, and then somehow made it to our contemporary civilization. That's one theory I have. Statistical patterns. The text consists of over 170,000 characters, with spaces dividing the text into about 35,000 groups of varying length, usually referred to as words or word tokens. Oh, you can't make this stuff up. Many researchers have commented upon the highly regular structure of the words. So, practically no words have fewer than 2 letters or more than 10. Some words occur in only certain sections or only in a few pages. Others occur throughout the manuscript. And you can certainly take a look at yourself and take a look at it for yourself and come to your own conclusions, because there are some interesting repetitions that you can observe, but what exactly are you looking at? That's the interesting aspect of it, and that's what continues to contribute to the enigmatic nature of the Voynich manuscript. So we have this remarkable manuscript that they tell us is a codex, but they still call it a manuscript. They've indicated that they've had crypto analysis done on this during the high part of World War II, or directly after it, when you would like to think that people who were working on deciphering would have more important tasks to conduct, and yet they were dedicated to trying to decipher the Voynich manuscript. What do they tell us is the purpose of it? The overall impression given by the surviving leaves of the manuscript is that it was meant to serve as a pharmacopoeia or to address topics in medieval or early modern medicine. However, the puzzling details of the illustrations have fueled many theories about the book's origin, the contents of its texts, and the purpose for which it was intended. The first section of the book is almost entirely, or almost certainly, herbal, but attempts have failed to identify the plants either with actual specimens or with the stylized drawings of contemporaneous herbals. Only a few of the plant drawings can be identified with reasonable certainty, such as a wild ponsy and the maidenhair fern. The herbal pictures that match pharmacological sketches appear to be clean copies of them, except that missing parts were completed with improbable-looking details. In fact, many of the plant drawings in the herbal section seem to be composite. The roots of one species have been fastened to the leaves of another, with flowers from a third. Very interesting, and we have to wonder what the meanings of that could be. And when we go through looking at it, we will postulate and speculate on what there may be meaning behind some of these amalgamations of plants and the other pictures that we see. Astrological considerations frequently played a prominent role in herb gathering, bloodletting, and other medical procedures common during the likeliest dates of the manuscript. However, interpretation remains speculative, apart from the obvious zodiac symbols in one diagram possibly showing the classical planets. Very interesting. What do we know about the history of the book? Much of the early history of the book is unknown, though the text and illustrations are all characteristically European. How exactly do they extrapolate that if this is a language that nobody knows of, yet it's characteristically European? Fascinating conclusion. In 2009, University of Arizona researchers radiocarbon dated the manuscript's vellum to between 1404 and 1438. Now, radiocarbon dating. Remarkable science. In addition, Macron Association Westmont, Illinois found that the paints in the manuscript were materials to be expected from that period of European history. Of course they were. There have been erroneous reports that Macron Associates indicated that much of the ink was added not long after the creation of the parchment, but their official report contains no statement of this. The first confirmed owner was George Baresch, a 17th century alchemist from Prague. How exactly did they document this? Who knows? Baresch was apparently puzzled about this sphinx that had been taking up space uselessly in his library for many years. So I wonder if this gentleman left a series of notes in a shoebox somewhere, and that's how they were able to document his ownership and how he was puzzled by this. Fascinating that they have this amount of detail from the 17th century. He learned that Jesuit scholar Kircher from the Collegio Romano had published a Coptic Egyptian dictionary and claimed to have deciphered the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Baresch twice sent a sample copy of the script to Kircher in Rome asking for clues. The 1639 letter from Baresch to Kircher is the earliest known mention of the manuscript to have been confirmed. And again, we kept a letter from 1639. It's just remarkable. Very remarkable. In any event, we've got some more details on the history of it, and then, of course, it ended up in the possession of Wilfrid Voynich. And again, this is something else from that very questionable time period of the late 19th to the early 20th century. So in and of itself, who exactly knows? Is all this history made up? Is the more recent acquisition of this manuscript more true? Who knows? But it is fascinating that this manuscript has been well known, and it seems to have elicited study from some vast national resources during the greatest global conflict in our recorded history. So let's take a look and see what we can glean from our own analysis of the Voynich manuscript. And as I go through this, I invite you to pay attention, and by all means, in the comments section, please let me know what your own observations are. I would certainly like to hear all interpretations of what we may be looking at and what it could mean. That's what this is all about, and I think that's the greatest joy in this type of research. We're going to be looking at some selected sections of the book, and I certainly invite all of you to look through the book on your own and see what particular depictions stand out the most to you. We're starting in the herbal section of the manuscript, and right off the bat we see that we have a very remarkable depiction of some sort of plant. Now, what the mainstream account tells us is that they've mixed and matched certain plants with different root and stem systems. What I'm reminded of looking at both of these plants is the depiction that I saw of trees and roots in the movie Metropolis. Now, maybe I'm just a little off on that comparison, but I have seen similar depictions of this in many science fiction movies as well, and Metropolis is considered one of the original science fiction movies. What's really being depicted here? Is this some sort of plant that was made, or was this some sort of plant that was available in a very different landscape at the time that this manuscript was originally drawn? And the other question we have to ask is, when was this drawn? What time frame when we look at our 5 eras theory? Well, I already said that I didn't think this came from the Tartarian civilization or the civilization that preceded ours, whatever we want to call it. But nevertheless, I do believe that it was no doubt composed potentially during a time when civilization was in a state of disarray. At a time when learning was lost for whatever reason, either in the middle of a reset or right after a reset. When they were attempting to preserve knowledge that was essential for not only the survival but the prosperity of human beings. That's my particular theory, and I'm just positing that now as we go through and look at this, because I believe that the reason for cataloging these plants, these unique herbal remedies, is so that knowledge can be preserved. Unfortunately, when we talk about the language, and who knows what language this actually is. Or it could be possible this entire thing is just a very elaborate forgery, although it would have taken a lot of effort to produce a forgery like that. And to what end? Just to keep our attention on it? Well, it's only one manuscript, so how long would it really keep our attention on it? And that's a question I invite you to answer in the comments. But we notice something similar about the plants, and that's the root and stem system. They seem to be very similar in the depictions, and then whatever you have on the top, whether it's flowers, fruit, or whatever, they seem to vary considerably. But it's all very remarkable, and again, I invite your analysis on what you see and what you think you see in this. Is there something that has more of a link between the plants and the biological components of human beings, or is there something even more? And we go to another set of images, and here we have the same thing, the elaborate root system, and then some leaves and what appear to be remarkable flowers, although who knows for sure. And then something blooming up top here, an amazing, beautiful flower. Now, is there something very special about each of these plants? Do each of these plants have a remarkable property? And could this manuscript be telling us about how you can exploit the properties of these plants to produce very beneficial health effects? We're often told there was a great difference in the old world in how they practiced medicine compared to how we practice medicine today. And I think we see a lot of evidence in that, especially with our whole concept of everything needing to be diagnosed and repeatedly diagnosed. Now, I'm not passing judgments on medicine or anything like that. I'm simply trying to come up with theories for what this book could mean. And of course, we're told that the mainstream thinks that this is all legitimately cataloged, but of course the so-called science, as they call it, because whenever you talk about anything such as astrology or the other dirty word, alchemy, those are things that they don't like to talk about, and that's considered, well, it's not even considered pseudoscience, it's considered magic and superstition. So in any event, just keep that in mind, and could this potentially be something that you could extrapolate alchemy or other benefits to the human body? That's something I want you to keep in mind as we continue with this exploration. And again, looking at some more, we see the same thing. The very developed root and stem system, very remarkable. It's almost as though this plant could get up and take a walk on its own and then plant itself somewhere else. Although who knows what the actual nature of this root system is, and it's almost as though that this is a vase that does have some ambulatory capability. Quite remarkable when you pair that with what you see at the leaves and the flowers, and if only we had some idea what the text here said, although deciphering it, as they said, has been completely futile, and all the best efforts haven't yielded any results at this time. There are many, many theories that you can find, and you can certainly spend the better part of an afternoon just looking into those theories, and that's why I think it's sometimes better that we just look at it with our own eyes and our experiences and combine that to see what we could potentially extrapolate from these plants. Nevertheless, what we can conclude is that these are very beautiful depictions, they're very detailed, and it's clear that this wasn't done by any sort of automatic rendering or computer, but these were hand-drawn. Again, potentially by someone who is trying to preserve the knowledge. For the benefit of humanity, perhaps? And now we go into more of the astrology section, and here, what do we really have? It's hard to tell. And we have 4 figures potentially pointing in 4 cardinal directions, northeast, southwest, or maybe something else entirely. There are many different interpretations you can take of it. We have a series of rings, circles going outwards. So what's this really saying? What's this really showing? And please let me know in the comments, because quite frankly, I'm baffled in terms of even what sort of analysis to give to this. There's many different meanings that can be assigned, and you have to be careful because you want to try to extrapolate some theories that have some legitimacy to them, and you're not just looking at shadow puppets and you're just coming up with what your imagination says. Although the limitations that we have, and we don't have a lot of background knowledge and we can't understand the language, is that's what we're left with. So who knows? 4 individuals pointing out the clouds, giving different indications of the wind, potentially talking about when days turn to night. Who knows? It could all be in there, and it could all be in this text, for all we know. Or it could be saying something completely different. And then here the figures get a little bit more elaborate. Here potentially what could be the sun or a star or some depiction of it. Potentially this is a moon cycle, who knows for sure. And then you're talking about different months, potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's possible. Or it could be indicating something else, because 360 degrees, you divide it by 12, what are you left with in every single measurement? Is it 30 degrees? Is it 36 degrees? The whole point being is that you see the concept of a circle a lot, and you see how a circle is divided. And that is something that seems to be a recurring theme, especially when we look at older depictions. So, not sure exactly what they're saying or showing here, but there are many different interpretations, and we could certainly spend a lot of time looking at it. Even if we don't understand the language, we do get some strange feeling of familiarity with it, and that's what I'm trying to relate to you, and it's very challenging, and that's why there's so many different interpretations of these works. And here we're going on, and this is interesting because it looks like we have perhaps different flowers or different devices that are pointing towards something in the center. Not sure what it is, but here you have 4 protrusions going in 4 distinct different directions. And again, we're not sure what the writing says, although there is like some sort of smaller diagram here in the corners. In each of the corners, this one's colored. And then over here on the right, clearly some depiction of the sun. And we know we certainly see the sun or the stars. And it's funny how you see this star symbol that comes up quite frequently in this work. And yet, look at how finely detailed this is here, and the outer circumference going around this sun figure. Quite remarkable, and if only we knew what it was saying. I know I'll lament that a lot, but even if we don't know what it's saying, it's very beautifully done, and it does give us many different ideas for what this could be representing. When you see certain stars in certain seasons, perhaps, or maybe it's a much more accurate calendar than something we could even imagine. And again, this isn't something that was recorded on the best devices of the day. This was something that was done in sort of an ad hoc fashion, something that was done as a contingency plan to try to preserve this knowledge through a time of great difficulty and suffering. And then here we have 3 more, and these drawings just seem to keep getting more complex, although they're always based on the circle, as though you're looking down on a circle with different meanings. Are we seeing flowers? Are we seeing some other sort of device? Are we seeing some sort of depiction of something that could perhaps pertain to the use of sound and the effects of sound on the land? Many different interpretations that we could bring to it. I like how the curves wrap right into this. Sort of reminds me of the glaive from the movie Kroll, if anyone's ever seen that. But in any event, just very, very beautiful. Of course, modern scientists would probably tell us that, well, this kind of resembles a galaxy. Yeah, don't worry, he's going to be making an appearance in this video, so just hold on. Anyways, like all the stars and just the attention to detail that was done in each of these drawings, and how much time did this take, and how was this originally done? Those are questions I would certainly like answered, and I invite guesses and hypotheses of our own as we go forward. This is a very interesting one because here we see some more detail. It looks like we have like 2 fish creatures here in the very middle. And we don't know if this is something symbolizing an astrological calendar or something much more complicated. Perhaps different levels in existence of humanity, in the past going to the future or the future to the present. It's interesting that every single person is depicted as though they're in some sort of like little individual tub almost. One of those little individual baths from the miniseries Shogun, I'm reminded of. Or the book. The book is very well done by James Clavell. But in any event, it's remarkable to see this. And you have to wonder, what exactly are they saying and showing here? Because as you go towards the internal part of these circles, or the interior circles, it's almost like people are starting to come out of these. So not really sure. I mean, is this some sort of rejuvenation device that they're all in? Is this reflecting a cycle of life? Many different possibilities. And then here we see that, again, we continue this theme of circles and these circle motifs. And again, we invite some different animals, which seem very extraordinary in and of themselves. And again, we have people around them. And here in this circle, we have people actually standing up and walking around. And here it's almost like we have a meeting or some sort of conjoining of some sort of concept with human beings. So just remarkable, many, many different details, and yet all very well done, very artistically done in all these pages. Now we go to the next part of the book. And this part of the book, it almost seems as though we could extrapolate some sort of scientific or rejuvenation technique that's going on. We're not really sure. Is this where you mix together all the plants into a herbal medicine and then you have people sit in a collective bath and then they're rejuvenated? Or is this referring to some sort of alchemical process where people pass on their genes and their characteristics to their offspring? I mean, anything's possible. It's remarkable when you look at this. And of course, some mainstream accounts will tell us that these are nymphs. I'm not exactly sure where they get that account from. Because again, you see this theme again of this STEM system that seems to be producing different aspects. Is it producing food? Is it producing some sort of nourishment? Or is it some sort of rejuvenation, or perhaps a life extension technique that's beyond us? Why was there so much effort devoted to this in World War II? Because people looked at this before us and they had to have come to their own conclusions, and if they thought there was any sort of possibility of that, you can imagine that they'd be devoting all kinds of resources to deciphering the book. And, well, the manuscript, I should say. And you have to wonder, what did they really think was possible, and what are we really looking at? Is it just our imaginations? Who would take the time to do this if we go off of the mainstream narrative? Who in the 15th century would be taking all the time to compose this, and what are they really trying to say? Well, of course, they'll tell us they're just trying to preserve their crazy, uneducated medicine systems at the time, and yet to me, they're doing it with very elaborate detail, and someone's doing it with freehand and taking a lot of time. Very interesting. And here it gets even more complicated when you see these processes potentially of rejuvenation. But when you see these images of how these individuals, and yes, we could say that they're women, they seem to be depicted as women, but I don't think it really matters as much in the fact that, is this showing something about the reproduction cycle, or is this showing something about rejuvenation? Because we have a lot of accounts in myth of people living much longer than they do contemporaneously. Although we're constantly told by our mainstream that in the 19th century especially, the average age was around 40. Of course, they'll tell us that's because of a high infant fatality rate at that time, but nevertheless, it's something remarkable to consider. Or is it just some sort of natural progression of bathing systems and they wanted to depict it in this book? It's just remarkable, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think is being depicted here. Now, the book ends with a section where it seems to combine both the plants. So it looks like we have the depictions of the plants from earlier, or at least some sort of focus on the root and stem system. And then we have these containers over here. So we're not sure if this is how you mix all these things in this container with some sort of special concoction, and this is what you bathe in, and this could be the life extension aspect of it, or is this just good health, or is this just what they believed at the time? So a lot of people extrapolate from it. But then the book ends with several pages of text, and again, deciphering the text proves to be challenging. I wonder if there's any means to actually decipher the text, if there'd be something beyond a theory or some ability we would have to do it. Although, what would be the method to deciphering it? I think that's enough. Thank you very much. So yes, Carl Sagan provides some concept that perhaps we could find a Rosetta Stone where we have this language printed potentially with Middle or Old English, or who knows what, maybe French or something from the Middle Ages. But nevertheless, let's go to the conclusions of what we have in the Voynich manuscript. It has still not been deciphered or translated. We don't have the Rosetta Stone, we don't have any crazy French intervention in Egypt from perhaps, say, the Suez Canal crisis where they found a stone with both the Voynichnese, as they call it, with French and English from the Middle Ages. It may indeed be a fraud. And if it is a fraud, then why and how does it even exist? Well, it could be something that's designed just to mislead us, or it could be another aspect of the truth being hidden in plain sight. And I think the whole point of hiding the truth in plain sight is that's usually the truth that's easiest to hide, because people aren't going to question things when they're just showing it to you. So if this is something that's genuine, then it appears it could be a first-hand account of technologies and abilities beyond our understanding. And my theory is that this is just simply a recording made by some person who is in times of great difficulty and challenge. And perhaps they were even trying to figure out how they were going to survive day to day. But nevertheless, it is very artistically inspired, and it's very beautiful to look at. So by all means, please share with me. What are your conclusions and theories? Billions and billions. That's enough, Carl. That's enough. Why don't you go back to eating some apple pie? So please share with me what your thoughts are on this. As always, explore yourself, ask questions, and you'll restore the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to the Restitutor Orbis channel, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to be conducting an exploration into the reality dysfunction, or evidence of other worlds. And I'm sure you're all asking yourself, what on earth is he talking about? Reality dysfunction? Evidence of other worlds? I mean, I thought this was just an exploration of validating or invalidating evidence of the existence of Tartarian and old world civilization that came before ours. Well, it is, but in recent explorations, I came across some very interesting evidence that may look at different theories that I postulated when I went over the grand theories of Tartaria and the old world. And you might recall from that video, the theory that I tend to go with the most is theory number one here. Humanity has experienced 5 ages or eras of time. And we don't know the number of years, and everything is based on proving or disproving the evidence that we have for that. And yes, don't worry, I will be getting back to the amazing hands that we saw in Vietnam in a video later this week. I think we do have an answer on that one. And it probably didn't turn out quite the way we thought it did, and that's okay. That's why we investigate and look at evidence. But in recent explorations, especially going back to Duluth with Old World Exploration, which was a pleasure to do earlier this week, I saw numerous instances of evidence that there could be a simulation, or alternate realities, or a confluence of realities. Well, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, we're going to go through and look at some evidence from Duluth and validate it based on what we're told, with the timeline, the historical account, and then just considering the raw possibility of doing things. And from that, we're going to come to some conclusions that may show that there's something off with our reality. There may be glitches. What's the reason for these glitches? Well, it's all things we're going to have to look at and see if we can come to a conclusion on. And of course, I always have theory number 6, a combination of theories. Could be that we're living in a dream, and in that dream we have a confluence of alternate realities, and those alternate realities give us indications that we experienced 5 ages. I know it's complicated, but just stay with me because I think this exploration will show how there could be other theories and how the evidence supports other theories. And where are we going? Well, we're going to Duluth, Minnesota, a very interesting city with an interesting history. So, where exactly is Duluth? Well, we're up here in this area between Wisconsin and Minnesota and on the western edge of Lake Superior. And this is the city of Duluth. Let's take a look in aerial imagery. Very interesting city, amazing port. And this unique piece of land right here is called Minnesota Point or Park Point. Yes, it's a very natural looking strip of land, isn't it? That seems to protect the harbor from wind and waves in Lake Superior. And Lake Superior has quite the reputation for having some extreme waves and extreme weather. In fact, it's even known as the Great Lakes Triangle. Oh yeah, there's our realistic image there. The Great Lakes Triangle, where many ships have disappeared, to include the Edmund Fitzgerald, and Canadian artist Gordon Lightfoot did a really good song about it in the 1970s. In any event, it should be noted that there is a natural access point into the harbor over here that was already in existence. But yet, anywhere you look along Minnesota Point, it's very clear there's been the efforts of human beings to change this into an accessible harbor. And right here we have the aerial lift bridge. And then, of course, this pier that's very, very clearly dug out. And yes, the mainstream narrative does say that it's dug out. And then here you see the rest of the city of Duluth, just resting on the side of Lake Superior. So, similar layout to Milwaukee, which is another city that we've looked at, but this is on the western edge of Lake Superior. So, okay, it makes sense. It's a port city. It could have grown fast, right? Yes. But let's take a look at what the actual story of Duluth is and how quickly it grew. What's the official story behind Duluth? Well, let's take it from the city itself, the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce, Duluth History and Area Info. Anishinaabe and Dakota tribes are the first known inhabitants of the western Lake Superior region, and it wasn't until around the 1650s or 1660s that Pierre Esprit Radisson of France explored the area. Named Duluth in 1856, the city's name recognizes Frenchman Daniel Greysolon Sieur de Lot, who came in 1679 to set up fur trade routes. I wonder if he knew about Holy Hill over in Wisconsin. Well, it's a discussion for another time. Duluth had a shaky start, an 1857 economic crash, and an 1859 scarlet fever epidemic. However, resources, first copper and later iron ore and lumber, helped greatly. Well, because, if you just have resources, you don't need people, right? They'll just generate people. So did financier J. Koch's persuasion of the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad to make Duluth its northern terminus, which, combined with the port, easily enabled efficient transportation. Here's the best part. In 1871, workers dug a canal in Duluth so ships could easily enter the harbor, and in the 1900s, Duluth's port handled more tons yearly than New York City. The canal separated Minnesota Point, Park Point, from the rest of the city, so people originally accessed Park Point by ferry ride. And we'll take a look at that. Yes, it's quite an interesting ferry ride, not what you might think. In 1904 and 1905, here it is, the aerial ferry bridge was constructed. People were carried across via a heavy-duty gondola, which also bore their transportation vehicles. The ferry bridge was a unique bridge, only resembling one other in the world, in Rouen, France. The actual lift, a 386-foot-long suspension that cars drive on now, was added in 1929 and 1930. We'll be taking a look at that too. When the St. Lawrence Seaway, the 114-mile channel between Montreal and Ogdensburg, New York, opened in 1959, Duluth was ready. With a new addition to the bridge, a deep canal, and a harbor, ocean vessels could easily access Duluth. Although the harbor is 2,342 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, Duluth is the biggest inland harbor in the world, and it shows it. And then just one last point we'll go over here. Duluth was founded on industry, and although warehouses are now shopping districts, the history is evident. For example, and then they go over a couple buildings, the Canal Park, and Canal Park is beautiful, and it's basically been turned into a gigantic tourist attraction. So very interesting on that aspect of the history. Well, let's look into some more detail. Let's start by taking a look at the demographics and historical population of Duluth. So here, according to the census, we started with 80 people in 1860. United States Civil War went on, and it should also be noted in Minnesota there was the Dakota War that started in 1862, and that was against the aforementioned Native American Dakota tribe. And we're told that was a very difficult war. So not only was Minnesota fighting in the Civil War, it was also fighting a Native American uprising, or resistance, whatever you want to call it, in the state of Minnesota. 1870, population 3,131. 1880, population 3,483. Okay, so adding about 350 or so people over 10 years, I can believe that. But then in 1880, we go to 1890, and the population goes up to 33,115, an increase of 850% in 10 years. And then in 10 more years, it goes up to 52,000. 10 more years, it goes up to 78,000. And finally, it tops out at about 100,000 and stays around there from 1930 to 1960, and then it declines a little bit. Yes, this 10-year growth spurt is just unbelievable. How is it possible that that many people could have gone to Duluth? Okay. Maybe there's some official explanation that we're missing. Perhaps there's something in the mainstream that I haven't looked at yet. Well, there is an explanation given, and they've got a doozy for us, let me tell you. So let's head up to it. Pretty city. Hey, look at that. View from International Space Station, 2017. Wow, look at that image. How come we can't get imagery like this on Google? Look at those huge waves in Lake Superior. Wow, no wonder they have so many shipping accidents there. No wonder they call it the Great Lakes Triangle when you have these very large waves. Just incredible footage from the International Space Station. All right, I digress. But what's the account? What's the historical explanation for why Duluth grew so fast? Well, they have one, and it's called The Untold Delights of Duluth. Early doubts about the Duluth area's potential were voiced in The Untold Delights of Duluth, a speech by U.S. Representative J. Proctor Knott of Kentucky. Now, why is a U.S. representative from Kentucky giving a speech about Duluth? Okay. There was the quote-unquote manifest destiny concept they tell us about settling the United States, westward expansion, and basically moving anyone out of the way. Fine. Okay, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. But what did this guy say? U.S. House of Representatives, January 27th, 1871. So, again, right after the U.S. Civil War, about 6 years later. His speech opposing the St. Croix and Superior Land Grant lampooned Western boosterism, portraying Duluth as an Eden in fantastically florid terms. The speech has been reprinted in collections of folklore and humorous speeches and is regarded as a classic. The nearby city of Proctor, Minnesota is named for Knott. even though Proctor seems to have been his middle name, but alright, whatever. This gets better. Duluth's unofficial sister city, Duluth, Georgia, got its name in 1871 shortly after Knox's speech gained national attention. Prominent Georgia newspaperman and politician Evan P. Howe was called upon to make remarks at the dedication of a new railroad line into Howell's Crossing, a village named for his grandfather. Howe humorously suggested that the community be called Duluth instead, and the townspeople agreed. Proctor Knott is sometimes credited with characterizing Duluth as the zenith city of the unsalted seas, but the honor for that coinage belongs to journalist Thomas Preston Foster, speaking at a 4th of July picnic in 1868. Okay, so let's just unpack this one. This is hilarious. So we have a representative in Congress out of Kentucky who's going off against this westward expansion, because we're told that Kentucky used to be considered the West, and then they didn't like this continued westward expansion. So a guy makes a speech, U.S. representative, and he's basically making fun of the whole concept and boosterism, saying that people shouldn't be promoting all these untapped settlements. And you know what? It makes sense, because who in their right mind would want to leave the comforts of an established civilization to go to an area where nobody's living and it's completely bleak and barren, even if there's natural resources there? And they try to give us explanations by saying, well, you could get free land and free stuff and it wouldn't be hard at all. And certainly nobody thought that there would be hard work involved and that you would be on the edge of civilization and you would have to defend yourself and there'd be all these other hardships. Nope, I gave a speech and we believe it. But I think the most unbelievable part to me, aside from that, Duluth's unofficial sister city in Duluth, Georgia in 1871. So, this is Georgia, 6 years after the United States Civil War. Just a few short years after Sherman's march to the sea, and Georgia is going to allow one of their towns to be named after a town that's in a state that contributed quite a few soldiers to fight in the United States Civil War. Now remember, we're also told that other places like Vicksburg didn't even celebrate the 4th of July until I don't think it was World War II or sometime thereabouts. But in any event, yes, we have to completely ignore all these inconsistencies, and it was just basically a speech that roused all these people to want to go to Duluth. And suddenly it went from 3,000 to 30,000 in 10 years. Although it wasn't right after the speech, because remember in 1871 it was 3,000, in 1880 it was still about 3,000, and then it exploded in that 10-year period. Well, what else did they do in that 10-year period? What really stands out about this? Okay, so a bunch of people went to Duluth. Well, let's take a closer look at what they achieved in addition to just sending a bunch of people to Duluth. So let's look at some images of Duluth from its history. This is Minnesota Point, that strip of land that conveniently protects the harbor and is no doubt made by natural forces. And this picture is from circa 19th century. Yes, that's the only detail you'll get on it. So a nice 100-year range on this photo. And it looks like we have some very, very well-dressed settlers, I suppose, or perhaps a crew from early National Geographic, because we don't know. This could be 1850, this could be 1897, and this is just a little setup. And who even knows if this photo is actually taken on Minnesota Point? I question that, because there are just things that look odd about it. It looks like we have Native Americans, possibly from the Dakota tribe. And it looks like we have some temporary housing for them, but then we've got some strange structures in the back here. So who knows what's really going on in this photo? This photo really doesn't tell you anything, and it creates more questions than it answers. But it goes back to what I was saying about how anybody can label any photo to say anything. And this photo could have been taken in Canada. This photo could have been taken in Montana. We just don't know. So yes, there's a photo that supposedly is from Minnesota Point sometime in a 100-year span. Make of it what you will. Now this does actually look like it's terrain that matches Minnesota Point, and this is from the hill above Duluth in 1875. Now keep in mind that we were told the population is only 3,000, and from 1870 to 1880 it increased by about 300, 350 or thereabouts. But even so, it's still pretty well built out. It's kind of what we'd expect to see. But again, it's hard to know what to make of it. You can see that there's limited housing on Minnesota Point. How far does it go out? Can't really tell. Is that a road or something? This is really intriguing because they said that they already had the canal dug because everybody went out there with their pickaxes and shovels to get that canal dug. What kind of harbor facilities do they already have available? I think you can see a ship there. But pretty remarkable. And again, there's some questionable aspects to this photo. Again, make of it what you will. It's hard to say. It's hard to know. But that's 1875, and that's what they're telling us is Duluth. Okay. Here's Duluth in 1898. Now look at this. Look how well these harbor facilities are built out to start with. These huge warehouses, and okay, yes, we can explain that. And then you have the terminus for the train station, and oh, look, there's the train station right there, I do believe. Look how built out the infrastructure is in this city. Keep in mind that they didn't even have 30,000 people recognized until 1890. So this is only 8 years later. In just under 20 years, they were able to achieve all of this. And the high school is built. You can see that all the major edifices are standing. And these aren't your cheap little wooden buildings. These are the amazing buildings with the remarkable turrets. And when we look at some of the other detailed buildings that were built even before this, it gets even more crazy. Look at this house right here, just sitting right on the edge of the terrain. Just remarkable, though. And when you really think about it and you really consider it, this build out reminds you of the same build out we saw in San Francisco. Although they at least explain it with a gold rush, and they at least allow for about 20 to 30 years, although you can find plenty of other photos there too, where it's only about 3 to 4 years. And this is the same story. Only here, we don't have a gold rush. We've just got some iron ore, we've got some copper, and then we've got some U.S. representative from Kentucky giving a speech lampooning the whole concept of boosterism. And this is what it led to, in addition to a suburb of Atlanta being named after a city in the north. So I guess Georgia got over the Civil War pretty quickly because nobody ever talks about Sherman's March down there, do they? I'm being very sarcastic. I've lived in Georgia, and to this day, conscious memory of that event still exists. So, again, make of it what you will. And when you look at this photo and you look at these roads and the way that the city's already built out, it matches the exact same footprint that it has today. And there was a high school that I looked at with Old World Explorer, and then way up over here on the bluff is where St. Scholastica would be because it wasn't built yet. So again, make of it what you will, but you go from this to this. And let's just take those pictures at face value. That's a 23-year difference. I mean, believe it if you will, believe it's possible. We'll talk about that here. And here is the aerial ferry bridge built in 1905. So after everybody went out with their pickaxes and shovels in the early 1870s and dug out this entire canal zone, and this is a very deep canal because this canal can get ocean-going ships through it, and that has to be pretty deep. So instead of just building the aerial lift bridge, they decided to build an aerial ferry bridge. And you have this little ferry that would ferry people across. And you have to wonder, what was really the point of that? Why not just actually have a ferry? You could tie it up on ropes and, use a large barge to go back and forth if that was your method of transportation. Nice building right there. And again, it just gives you the impression that there was a lot more going on. And then just look at the pier and how well built out that is. When was that constructed? Was that done when they went out there with their axes and pick shovels, or what? When the population was only 3,000, they brought in a lot of people from Minneapolis and St. Paul. They brought in Charles Ingalls and Mr. Edwards again to help out because, they were all over the place in that time frame. Like the poles, too, along it. And it doesn't look any different today. You can still walk along this pier, and it looks exactly the same. Very fascinating, very remarkable, and what are they trying to tell us? Well, then in 1929-1930, they converted the aerial ferry bridge into an aerial lift bridge that still stands and is in full operation today. But if you look at it, you can see that the frame is exactly the same. So the original frame that was built and designed from an engineering perspective just to support a ferry, with just a few reinforcements, is able to support a gigantic lift bridge. You can't make this stuff up. So let's look at Park Terrace in Duluth, built in 1890, and what's the story behind this place? And this was something that I looked at with Old World Explorer, and again, you just see this remarkable set of apartments that was built in 1890, and keep in mind, they built this when the population was on its way from growing from 3,000 to 30,000. So all these people coming from all over the United States because of the congressman's speech where he was lampooning it, and they showed up and they decided they were going to lay out this amazing foundation. They were going to build these remarkable stairs. They were going to build this entire terrace out of brick and solid material. Oh, and then as an afterthought, they were going to put all these amazing weather vanes on it, I guess for decoration. And they pulled all this off in a very short amount of time. And strangely enough, we should take a look into the actual history of Park Terrace because it's got a unique story behind it too. So let's look into that. Forgotten Minnesota. Yes, because they want you to forget. I'm surprised there's even an article on it. Stone ruins of Park Terrace in Duluth. Park Terrace was an opulent building of Victorian townhouses located on a steep hill just off of Masaba Avenue in Duluth. Built in 1890, keep in mind that's right when the population reached 30,000, by the Myers Brothers Investment Company at the cost of $50,000. Park Terrace was one of the first multi-family buildings in West Duluth. Two of the Myers brothers, Henry and Benjamin, lived at Park Terrace with their families. Henry was the president of the company, which was an established real estate investment firm in Duluth by the time Park Terrace was built. The brothers were especially active in expanding West Duluth and saw sophisticated rental townhouses as the way of the future. Benjamin was also the president of the Bayview Land Company and established the Bayview Heights area of West Duluth. A third brother, Jacob, lived on, so we get his story. He left Duluth for Galveston, Texas. So we've seen the amazing picture of it, and I've got a blow up of this, although I'm not really sure if this is an actual interior picture or if it's from something else. They tell us it's from this townhouse or these set of townhouses or whatever you want to call this, Park Terrace. It's a very unique building, a very unique set of structures, almost otherworldly in so many ways. The exterior of Park Terrace featured a grand corner tower complete with a large weather vane that sat atop an ornate metal dome. Because you need very large weather vanes and you need ornate metal domes. What am I thinking? 6 upward terraces climbed the steep hill on the northeastern side of the building, and 4 terraces ascended the northwestern side. To reach their home from the street, residents climbed concrete exterior stairs to a concrete walkway that led to a private porch at each home. 1890. There were no limits to what they could do then. The 8 townhomes in Park Terrace were either 2 or 3 levels and varied between 6 and 9 rooms. A 6-room apartment rented for $10 a month, and a 9-room home went for $40 per month in the 1890s. Each home was heated with a modern hot water system and offered residents one of the best views of the harbor of the city. And you can still go walk its ruins today, and they have a couple pictures of it. Maybe we'll just take a quick look. Some of the stairs right there. But when you walk it and when you see it, you just realize that this was a true structure. This was not some cheap wooden structure that they just threw up as we'd expect in the 19th century. This was a solid, hard foundation. A lot of it still remains. I really wonder how easy it was for them to tear it down. And of course, looking at deconstruction photos is a little difficult, but you can still see what remains of it. And it reminds us of many other walls and such ruins that we see across the United States. So that's the story with that, the stone ruins of Park Terrace. And once just such an amazing building that just seems something otherworldly, with hard materials and many, many weather vanes. I mean, how many do we count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and who knows how many we can't see. But in any event, it just defies easy explanation, and it defies what the mind could tell us about what we're really looking at. Now you might be wondering, well, is there anything left from that time frame that was built in 1890? Well, Park Terrace was torn down, but Chester Terrace still stands to this day in Duluth, Minnesota. And again, you can see this amazing construction that went into this. This is not wood. This is not cheap aluminum siding. This is not sheetrock. This is legitimate, hard material, whether it's rock, sandstone, limestone, marble, granite, whatever combination that they give for us for the old world buildings. You can see it very clearly in Chester Terrace. You may have been there much longer, but this is another structure that they say was built in 1890. Keep in mind, this was when the city was in its population boom, going from 3,000 people in 1880 to over 50,000 people in 1900. Quite amazing. The whole story of Duluth, when you pull it out, it's something that just doesn't add up. So what are really the theories behind this? How did we go from just a pile of trees and a couple of tents and some strange wooden buildings, although who knows when that photo was taken, to this amazingly built out city, to being able to throw up incredible terraces like this that are Victorian and opulent and luxurious in a city that was supposedly on the edge of the frontier, that was only settled because some congressman from Kentucky decided to lampoon the whole concept of westward expansion. And yet you can see the details in this. You can see what they were capable of. Could we even build something like this today? If this was the only building that an entire city of, let's say, 75,000 people, not even 30,000, we'll say 75,000 people, do you think it could be done in a reasonable amount of time? Because remember, this was already built by 1890. So that means that they started before 1890, before they even had 30,000 people in that city to do it. So how did they do it? How did they erect these amazing stairs? How did they lay this foundation, and on a hill to boot, and then added all this amazing elaborate structure? What are some theories? Theory is the timeline's vastly inaccurate. That's one theory. That we're not being told what actually happened. That Duluth was settled many decades, or even have to go back centuries before, as some have suggested for San Francisco to explain its rapid rise from what was supposedly nothingness. And you have to give the same explanation to Duluth. The timeline is just simply very inaccurate. Or, theory two, the 19th century civilization is far more advanced and capable than the 21st century. Yes, I'm going to just throw it out there and say that. Could we do this in the 21st century, even with heavy machinery? Well, we'd say we can, it's just the cost is prohibitive. That's always our explanation for everything and anything. And of course, we know what our Congress does these days. They talk about raising the debt ceiling in the United States. Really, what they ought to say is just unlimited money. That's what they mean, but I'll just come out and say it. Unlimited money. You can always just print more money. Inflation's no problem. This is the 21st century. In any event, find it very hard to believe. And then finally, it's a reality dysfunction, overlapping and converging realities, or it is a glitch-ridden simulation. What exactly do you mean by that, Aurelian? I mean that it could be possible that the reason that we see these strange structures that don't make any sense, whether it's Park Terrace here in Duluth, the pyramids in Giza, or pick any other amazing opulent building from the 19th century or early 20th century that still stands today, and try to explain it. So many of them defy explanation. The timeline doesn't fit. The capabilities of the contemporary time that they were built in doesn't fit. So how do you explain it? Is it possible that it came from some other reality? Well, how is that possible? Are there overlapping parallel realities? There was actually an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that was called Parallels, which featured Worf, of all characters, jumping from reality to reality throughout the episode. This was long before the advent of YouTube, and this is long before many others were postulating these theories on YouTube. This is when they were postulated in TV series and books. But the theory has been with us for a long time. Or it's simply a sign that we're in a glitch-ridden simulation that is either breaking down or has always had many glitches and just doesn't make any sense. I invite you, viewers, to let me know in the comments what you think. How do you explain Duluth? What makes sense from these theories? Or do you have your own theories? Please let me know. I'd love to hear what you think, and I want to consider it in a holistic fashion and continue explorations as we go. Well, thank you for joining me. Remember, explore yourself, ask questions, and restore the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe.